we're eternally bored. This is the beginning, so this means that we have an introduction of sort, and this should be it. Zevia can withstanding, because you really can't have that.
Paid sponsor.
Not a paid sponsor.
No, they're not.
But basically, in this weekend, internally bored, Trey and I have had two very interesting experiences from a gaming perspective. His was he went to Board Game GeekCon and has played many games talking from that. Mine is I have adopted a new puppy this week, and he thinks my bags of games is a toilet. And I have a very long story about that, or I can keep it very short. Anyways, let's go ahead and...
But if this is your first time joining us, we are Eternally Bored. We are a gaming podcast that kind of tries to set ourselves apart from other gaming podcasts because we like to talk more about not just the games, obviously, but there'll be plenty of discussion about the games, but also about the big issues that affect our industry, including social issues. Our first two episodes were about race. This one is not so much a social issue, but it is kind of a big issue in the industry that gets talked about a lot, which is the Spiel du Jahres, our industry's biggest award, and how it's kind of evolved over the past several years and the effects of that. But as Charles said, we're going to be talking about some games before we go into the big issue. That's our general show format, is talk about what we've been playing lately. And I have a lot to talk about because I was at BGG Spring and I played like 10 new games, but Charles wants to talk about Gwent, so I'll let him handle that.
Right. So basically, while he was at BGG Spring, Gwent came out for the public access beta. And for those who don't know, Gwent is a video game. It is a mini game inside of the Witcher 3 series that has been expanded out into a full-fledged standalone title that's currently in quote-unquote free beta test. But it's in a format sort of like Hearthstone. However, the reason we're bringing it up on the Board Game podcast is because it is this game right here, Condottieri, remade and sort of updated to a two-player game. Well, remade as a two-player game and sort of updated with the trappings of a collectible card game behind it. The main difference is there's no area control. You're just sort of trying to win the best of 3 rounds. So, very interesting game. I know you've played Hearthstone in the past, correct?
Yes, I have played a lot of Hearthstone.
So, if you've played any of these video game collecting card games, they want you to log in every day. They give you certain goals to get you to a certain point so that you're always logging in to get those, 6 victories or 6 rounds won to get enough to get a pack or something. So that is always also in the game. But the game itself is very much like Condottieri. A lot of hand management. You're trying to have the highest total at the end of each of the rounds, and since there's 3 total rounds and you only draw a total of, you start with 10 cards, then you draw 2, and then you draw 1. Okay. And so it's like very small, a lot of hand management and a lot of manipulation of things that we really like in board gaming. But
yeah, I like Condottieri.
Maybe we'll have a deeper strategy session on it later. But for you went to Board Game GeekCon, and what was your favorite game that you found?
Wait, what did you think about Gwent? Did you mention?
Oh, did I mention what I think about Gwent? I think it's a very good game. I enjoyed it a lot. I'm very addicted to it. I believe it's balanced, and they are consistently trying to rebalance it before the initial release. I mean, it's an extremely robust beta. I mean, it's basically down, or it's basically completed, and I think they're just utilizing the data that they have to see what cards are overly powered and which combinations might need to be nerfed before releasing the final version of the game. So looks like it has a lot of potential, and it's free.
And Charles brought up something interesting right before we started, is that the creator says that he was not inspired by Condottieri, even though they're so close in game format that almost seems impossible. So maybe in the future we'll have an episode about giving proper credit when it's due, because that definitely is something that comes up, because there's definitely games that take clear inspiration and then don't always get credit, and then there's games like Defenders of the Realm where they're like, oh, we were definitely inspired by Pandemic, which I think is kind of the proper way to do it, but that's another episode. Right now we're going to talk about BGG Spring. I played about 10, actually more closer to 15 games that I've never played, so I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. I'm not going to be talking much about rules. We generally don't. We mainly talk about our experiences because this is not really a rules podcast. But I'll give you a brief overview. I'll start from best to worst. My game of the con was Tricarion, which is not a new game. Came out in like 2015, I believe. It is a worker placement game, but that's like surface level. There's a whole lot more going on. It's also a spatial tile placement kind of game. It's also a set collection kind of game. It's also planning. There's a lot going on in Tricarion. I thought it was a brilliant, deep design, and I am actually a game designer as well, but there's so many layers here. I don't think I could design a game this deep. It's just not really my design style. But the trade-off of that is that it really like hurt my head. Like, this is like the quintessential brain burner. Just making all the gears turn in just the right way. And it was my first time playing, and we played with all the expansions except one. So that was probably a mistake on my part. I probably should have played the base game to start with, but I like expansions, so I'm just like, throw everything in, it'll be great. And it hurt my brain so much that even though I really love the experience, I'm actually not going to buy this game because I feel like I would play this game once per year and like, okay, I've hurt my brain enough this year with Tricarion, I don't need to play it again. So hopefully like once a year I can play someone else's copy and you know, hurt my head. But I did think it was a brilliant design, and it was very interesting and very fun to play. And it has actually a lot of replayability for those who don't mind getting their brain run through the ringer. So you could play it quite a bit and not get bored with it, but I think it was too much for me.
It's not that it was too much for you. It is that, and I played Tricarion a few years ago, or a couple years ago. Sometimes when a game tries to do too many systems at the same time, it is like a person with a rainbow hair. Rainbows belong in the sky. They don't necessarily belong on the ground. And Tricarion is one of those games that is like trying to be a rainbow, and it turns out to be a hot mess of gray areas that takes your gray matter just way too much time and effort to put everything together. In addition, I believe that there's, you know, at least in the initial game, I played the base game, there were some tremendous balance issues, and for a game that's going to last as long as it does, and
not only 3 hours at least,
not only last a long time, but during most of that time, not really being fun for anyone except for the people who are winning. And I mean, I could go on for this, but I don't want to talk about Tricarion. Let's move to something else. What was another game that you played and enjoyed?
I would like to mention the Eternally Bored is not officially against rainbow hair. I actually like rainbow hair, so we have a disagreement on that, as we have a disagreement on Tricarion. I thought it's a brilliant game, but yeah, it might have been a bridge too far, and just personally, for me, I don't think I could play it very often, but I still would highly recommend it to anyone who likes those sorts of games.
Run away. So what else did you play, Trey?
I played Kepler 3042, which is like a space exploration game. I would say it's a 2X game, not a 4X game, because there's no combat. You do research, you do exploration, and you do settling and exploitation. So maybe a 3X game, but there's no combat whatsoever. The only competition is for the planets. You're trying to settle planets out from other people. This game is actually not released in the US, and I don't know if it ever will be. I haven't heard much about it. I don't think it made much of a splash. But it is a really good, pretty well-balanced space exploration game, and how many of those exist, right? So, exactly. So, and the tech tree is pretty fascinating. I didn't like, though, I'm worried about the replayability in this game. Even though it's exploration, like, the exploration is a big factor as far as gameplay, but it's not a big factor as far as, like, oh, there's so much variation between the planets. The planets basically just produce different resources. So, exploration game is a main part of it, but it's not the exciting part. I think the tech tree and manipulating that is the most exciting point. Unfortunately, the tech trees are not asymmetrical. Your player board's going to be the same in every game, so I'm not sure about the replayability. But I had a great time playing it the one time, and I probably enjoy playing it a couple more times, but not a buy for me just because I don't think the replayability is there.
This sounds like your early review of Seafall. Remember the good old days?
Yeah. But we need to do a whole episode on Seafall. We don't have time to discuss it right now. But anyway, my third favorite game of the con, and one that I love so much I went and bought it immediately, is King Domino. I don't know if you can see it in the shot, but it's only $12 on Cool Stuff ink, so I don't know. Like, go buy it because it's so good and it's $12. It is an amazing filler game. Like, for a tile placement 15-minute filler game, like, it has killed any desire in me to ever play Carcassonne again, and pretty much most other tile placement games because it's just that good.
I mean, I played King Domino as well. I do think it is an excellent filler. I'm actually going to go get a copy myself with my next board game order because in my board game group, something like that you can just put down and explain as quickly as you can and has a great deal of, well, depth, I would say. Because even if when you explain it, it's going to, and if people AP, it's still probably only going to take 5 minutes per player.
Yeah.
That's with AP, and games like that are few and far between. So definitely, if you have any type, I think it's good for all ages too. Right?
Oh yeah, like this is a great family game. Like I think it was nominated for the Spiel des Jahres, and in my opinion, it should win hands down because this is a game you can play with your family, you can play with your gamer friends, and it's great fun. As you can see from my gaming shelf, I tend towards heavier, longer games, but this game was so much fun that I just had to buy it, and I'll be happy to play it anytime.
So yeah, I feel much the same way. What else did you get a chance to play while you're there?
El Dorado, and fun enough, so this is the Spiel des Jahres episode, and BGG always has like all the Spiel des Jahres games at their Spring Con laid out. So they had all of them, even the ones that aren't released here yet. One that's not released here yet is El Dorado. That's not the full name because there's like a whole bunch of El Dorado board games, but whatever one's released in 2016, that's the one you should look for, or 2017. I think is it Stefan Dora? I'm not sure, but it's sort of his style. It's basically a race game, but a deck builder. And race games, generally, I'm not a big fan of. Deck builders, I'm generally not a big fan of. But for some reason, putting these two together, because I think, personally, deck building is not enough to make a game about. Like, that's why Trains is one of my favorite deck builders, because you're manipulating the map. Tyrants of the Underdark, similar concept. So you have, like, a map to manipulate. I think that really helps deck building become worth having as a game mechanic. And El Dorado is a race game where you're trying to get from one side of the map to the other using a deck of cards that you build. And like, so the cards do different things, let you move a certain number of spaces or give you special abilities. And that it's super fascinating. And it is a family game. It's very simple. It is nominated for the Spiel des Jahres, I believe, not the Kinderspiel, which is like the heavy game award. And it's also very good. Not as good as King Domino in my opinion, but still very strong. And it should be getting a US release soon. So keep an eye out for it.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. I am a big deck builder fan, so I'm sort of excited that you have something that you actually like and will play again.
Yeah.
I was just gonna. My only quick question was: is it more like a Dominion type of like Dominion/trains, or is it like a Legendary Ascension type of deck builder in terms of how you're getting the cards?
The card purchase method is more like Dominion. So basically, you have a row of cards that's available, and then when one of those rows gets emptied, you can buy any card that is not from that row, and that will bring the whole stack down. So like you have a row of cards, like 6 different types of cards are available, and then you have 12 more on top that are unavailable. As soon as one empties, the next person who buys a card brings another stack down as soon as they buy from that stack. Okay. So it's kind of like an innovative buying mechanism as well. Kind of, it's basically like a riff on the Dominion system of purchasing cards. But that part was interesting and innovative. And I just think it was innovative to have like a race game based on a deck builder, and it was pretty well balanced, I think, and all around a good game. Next I want to talk about Glux, which is a new abstract game. It's also another one of these short filler games that I actually really enjoyed. I don't generally like abstract games, but because this one's so short and simple, like literally you could explain the rules in less than a minute.
Exactly what the Spiel des Jahres loves.
Yeah. So it might be nominated next year because I think it just came out. But it's a very good game. I highly recommend it. There's not much to say about it because it's just a simple abstract game, but it's very fun and pretty interesting system.
Now, is it a straight 2-player abstract, or is it expandable to?
No, it plays 2 to 4.
2 to 4. Okay.
Yeah. Next is Santorini. Actually, I played Charles's copy. Which is another abstract game, funnily enough. This is like a new version of a game that came out many years ago that was a pure abstract. Now they like themed it with Greek gods, and like you have gods that give you powers and things. So I thought it was a very interesting game. It's a very unforgiving game. Like you make one mistake in Santorini and you're done. So,
But the good part about it is that it is also another very easy to play game. You can get the rules down in about a minute, and
yeah,
you can play a full game in about 15 to 20 minutes.
yeah.
Um,
Some of the god powers are unintuitive. We were constantly looking up god power rules as we played, so that's a minor knock against it.
yeah,
But
true.
the gods do add replayability, so that's helpful.
Yeah, and there's 85 different gods in the game, and I think the way to win is very good. And plus, especially a game like this, I would say it's one of the most beautiful games you can put out in like a board gaming area. It builds
Yeah.
up very pretty abstract
Yeah.
of things that are going
For the price point, especially, it's quite excellent. Out of print right now, but it should be coming out soon. Probably by the time we air this podcast, maybe
Yeah.
it'll be released.
Speaking of out of print and in print and out of print and out of print again, I hear you play Fury of Dracula again.
I did. No, not again. This is
Not
the first
again?
time I've
This
ever
is your
played
first
it.
time?
First time I've ever
Oh,
played
okay.
it. And I
Wow.
did play the most recent edition, 3rd edition. So like that game is pretty interesting in that it's always had balance issues. Like originally, like
Extreme.
Dracula sucked, and so that was 1st edition. The Hunter sucked in 1st edition, and then 2nd edition. Dracula sucked, and the hunters were overpowered. And now in this 3rd edition, the scuttlebutt is that Dracula is unkillable in the hands of the right player. I tend to agree with that popular opinion. I mean, I was playing Dracula for the first time, and I was like, never in danger of losing this game. Basically, anytime you get into any trouble as Dracula, it's a hidden movement game, by the way, if you're unfamiliar with Fury of Dracula. Hidden movement game, the hunters are trying to find Dracula. He has to leave a trail of cards behind, and they can find that trail and then use that trail to hunt him down. The problem is, like, anytime you get in any kind of trouble as Dracula, you can just take to sea, like, play one of your sea cards, and they know you're in the sea, but they don't know where you're in the sea, and then you can just move really quickly in the sea, and you take damage while you're in the ocean as Dracula for whatever thematic reason, but it doesn't matter. Like, you can afford to take a little damage, and you just get away, and then they have to spend another long time tracking you down, and by that time, their game timer runs out. So.
Yes, it's the same game it always was.
Oh, does that problem in previous versions
Yes,
as well?
it really is, and honestly, it has a few other games in its ilk. Letters from Whitechapel is also another hidden movement game where you have the same problem. Not as
You'll
much.
never catch Jack the Ripper. And
Yeah,
if Jack the Ripper's good, like, you will never catch it. I mean, game groups disagree on that, but, in my biased opinion, I feel like our game group is pretty good at that game, and, like, Dracula. Jack the Ripper has never lost.
Right, and then there's also, I think, a game that came out last year called Last Friday. I didn't get a chance to play that, where you're basically Jason, and you're running away from Jason and something like that. But these hidden movement games, they all have the peculiar theme of, like, one player is literally a person holding the cheese in a maze, and everyone else is a mouse. And if you like to be a mouse, it's great fun to just run around with your head cut off or sniffing after cheese you'll never find. And if you just like messing with people, then play Jack or Jason or in this case Dracula, and you will have a great time. But
those games in general are very fun, but the problem is they're usually really long. So the version I own is, I think, probably the best balanced of those versions, and also the shortest, which is Spectre Ops. So also the Escape from Aliens in Outer Space, I have that as well. So those two games are both like way shorter than Letters from Whitechapel and Fury of Dracula, and I think they're better balanced as well. So let's go back. Oh, before we get back to the Spiel des Jahres games, I wanted to talk about the new version of Evolution. I got a chance to play that. Evolution: The Beginning.
The Beginning.
Have you played it?
I did not.
Okay.
I have friends who love Evolution though. So.
Yeah, Evolution is a very popular game in the Houston gaming circles. I think it's an okay game. I feel like the deck draw powers just like has too much control over you.
Top deck it for the win.
Exactly. Evolution: The Beginning has that same problem. However, I think it's a much better game because everything's streamlined, the rules are a lot simpler, and it's a lot shorter. It's like 30 minutes, 45 at most, whereas like Evolution can take an hour, maybe longer. So because they reduced the time and because they streamlined a lot of the systems and you get kind of the same experience, I would say it's a much better version. So I would recommend it. If you like Evolution, definitely pick it up.
Yeah, and I also think Evolution, all of them have a really good theme, and they're very easy to pick up. in general. So what else did you give a chance that you looked at while you're at BGG?
So I got to play the Spiel Jahres nominees, which are like the kids games. I'll go through all three of those. My favorite of them was Captain Silver, which is a real-time game, which I don't generally like, but it's very short. It's very simple. Basically, you have a bag of tiles, and you can't look in the bag, but you have to feel the tiles with your hands and try to find the one that you need to play. If you play the wrong one, there's a penalty. So like everybody's in their bag trying to find the tile they need, and it's like very fast paced because there's no timer. It's basically like people you slam it down, and like when someone takes a spot, then you go to the next shape. And so everybody's like, oh man, they got it. So then everybody's switching to try to find the new shape in the bag. And it's frantic. I think it's fun, and it's very short. It's not a game I'd want to play for like 30 minutes, but it's a 10-minute game. So pretty good, especially for kids. I mean, it's meant to be for kids, and I think it's a great kids game.
Possibly drinking games. From the sounds of it
Or
as
drink
well.
game with adult, yeah.
Yes.
Mysterious Forest, another kids game. This is a kids co-op game in a storybook telling format. Basically, you're on a quest. You're trying to get from point A to point B, and you're trying. It's a memory game, so you have to like look at all the different cards and try to remember what you need for this journey. And then when your journey begins, you're basically like just trying to draft the goods that you need. Put them in your backpack because you know you're going to need them later in the journey. And there's ways, if you make mistakes, your journey isn't necessarily over. There's different things you can use, powers you can do to kind of save yourself. So it's pretty forgiving. I mean, it should be because it's a kid's game, but I think it's moddable to make it harder. Overall, I think it's a quaint game. It's not really a game I would want to play, but I would play it with kids. And it is, a co-op for kids, which there's not a ton of those, so that's pretty cool.
They'll cheat anyway, so you're
Yeah.
fine. As long as you can get a little bit out.
And then the last one is Ice Cool, which is a dexterity game. You're flicking penguins around. I like some dexterity games. Like, I'll play Jenga pretty much anytime, or like, what's that one, Via Paletti, the stacking of the boards and the poles and whatever. That one's cool too, but Ice Cool to me was just kind of It didn't, I would play Jenga over that anytime. I'd play Crokinole, which is a flicking game, over that anytime. Everybody's really excited about Ice Cool. I mean, it is way cheaper than a Crokinole board, but for me it was just kind of I wasn't too impressed with it.
Sometimes you just need a Crokinole game, and sometimes you need Catacombs.
Yeah.
But that'll be the episode.
I would say if you're interested in Ice Cool, just get Sorry Sliders. It's you're not flicking, but Sorry Sliders is like a game you can buy at Walmart for like $10, and it's like you're like sliding these things. It's kind of like what's that game, like the Olympic sport where you're curling?
Oh, curling. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like curling. You're like trying to slide these things to make into a target. For like a cheap dexterity game, I think it's much better than Ice Cool, and it has like variable boards. So. Check that out if you're interested in a kids dexterity game.
Yeah, or if you're in the north, just go to your local ice skating rink and curl like a real person. Bring your brooms.
Or do that. Excellent. All right. Now we'll get into the games I did not enjoy. First, I'll say First Sparks, the Power Grid game. I've been wanting to play this game forever because I'm not a huge fan of Power Grid because too many times I've played it and someone gets an awesome power plant on turn one and then they win. And so they've won the game on turn one, and then we just played 3 hours to because people don't like to quit basically. But that happened to me one too many times with Power Grid, so I'm just kind of done with Power Grid. But I was excited about First Sparks because I don't know, it was Power Grid but shorter. So I like the system of Power Grid. I just don't like the way it plays out. And I know there's expansions that fits the problem that I just highlighted, but I haven't had a chance to play those yet. But I want to try First Sparks to see if it's better. I first of all, the rules are terrible. They were probably German rules and translated to English, and the translator were just bad. But these rules are like indecipherable, and they're not organized well. So we struggled to play this game, even though it's a simple game. The rules are like 4 pages, but still, just bad rule book. The game itself, I feel like the economy is a little too fragile, and it has the same runaway leader problem. Like, I was in the lead all game, and I crushed everyone, and it was just like...
Power Grid.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was Power
Just
Grid.
like Power Grid.
Yeah. So I wasn't too impressed. It doesn't solve the problem of Power Grid, and rules are bad, and economy's too fragile. Next is Kyoto Protocol, which is like just a simple card game, filler game. It works. I mean, it's like a 10-minute game, but it's not exciting. Like, there's just nothing really exciting about it, and your choices are pretty obvious, so don't recommend that one either. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the board game. This is the new board game that just came out. I know it's not the one that came out like 2000 or something. That game's actually pretty good according to the ratings. I haven't played it. But this is the new game, and it's not good. It's basically a take on Arkham Horror slash Touch of Evil. It's more like Touch of Evil than Arkham Horror, I think. And it's not good. It's a very not good game.
It tries to be Buffy, but ends up really being Angel at heart.
Hey, some people really love Angel. I don't know. I never finished Angel, but
I know quite a few women who loved Angel at the time, but
Yeah. But yeah, like this is just a cash-in game. Like if you want to play that game, just get Arkham Horror or Touch of Evil instead. And again, Touch of Evil is closer to what it's trying to accomplish, but Touch of Evil is a much better like game system, whereas like Buffy is just not good. It's imbalanced, it's boring, it's way too easy, or could be way too hard depending on how you edit it. Next, I played Fetch, which was like a filler game that they were shopping at one of these little booths. It was
please play my game.
Yeah, like one of those like a company I'd never heard of, and although it was like a subsidiary of like a larger company, like one of those like Ultra Pro I think was the owner of the company, but it was like some small company I'd never heard of, and like they were showing me their game, and I was like, I mean it was okay, but it was like just a very meh filler.
Yeah, I mean there's nothing worse than a small company game when you just look at it and you're like, you will never be part of Asmodee.
Yeah.
You just know you're done.
You will not be assimilated. You're not worthy. But yeah, I don't recommend it. Next, I played Dungeon, which is the dice rolling game that you're like is based on Dungeons and Dragons from the 80s, right? This is one of the first board games I ever played, and it hasn't changed and it hasn't aged well. It's still like your fate is totally determined by the dice. Like there are very few decisions at all to make in the game, and if you roll bad, you'll lose. If you roll well, you'll win. That's what the game boils down to. I can't really recommend it. There's just much better games of that ilk.
Was this a game that you played after midnight or something? That someone just talked you into playing? Or?
No, this is me wandering around the ballroom, and like needing to find a game, and someone had the players needed sign up, and so I was like, oh, I haven't played this game. Something you'll need to know about me: I will play any game because I want to experience all the games. So I'll jump into any game, even if I know it's probably going to be crap, and this one certainly was.
But it makes it on his list of games played. So you ever get a chance to go see Shampoo for You on BGG, just take a look. He meticulously keeps track of this list.
Yeah.
Cannot say anything.
Well, I'm trying to get to 1,000 games played. I'm just shy by like 100 or 200, so we'll get there.
Games and beers. So what was the worst game you played then?
The worst game I played, I'm sorry to say this because it comes from a great company. I think this is a Queen game, or maybe it's not Queen, but I remember seeing the company on the box and I was like, this is a good company. This game's got to be good. I did not like it. Raise Your Goblets is basically like a push your luck type of game where you're like poisoning goblets and you're trying to make sure your opponents drink the poison and you don't. The problem is, well, there's a lot of problems in this game. You just have very little control over which goblet you drink. So even if you poison the right goblet, you might not drink it. I had the unfortunate experience of the person who called for the toast every time was the person to my right. And they did it as soon as they could. So I never in the entire game had an opportunity to call for a toast. And I was always in the worst position because the person, when someone calls for a toast, the person to their left gets one more action and then it goes around clockwise, and the person who calls for the toast gets the last action, which when you're determining which cup you want to drink out of is extremely important. So like basically I got to act, and then 5 other players got to act, and those 5 players had a say in which goblet I drank out of, and I had 0 say. So it was just a terrible game. Like I had no control over my destiny in that game. It was just bad.
I mean, it sounds like you were wanting to drink the poison goblet by the end of the game. But
yeah,
I guess if but you're not really dead if you drink the poison goblet?
No, there's no player elimination. You just don't score any points and you have no chance to win.
That's terrible, man. Those games need player elimination because they're bad.
If ever there was a game that needed player elimination, this was the game. Alright, so that's it for the games that I played. Next, before we get into the topic du jour, which is talking about the dumbing down of the Spiel des Jahres, I wanted to just go through our least favorite and most favorite Spiel des Jahres games. So, Charles, why don't you start us off? Let's start with the worst. Or you want to start with best? What do you think?
Man.
Let's start with worst. Everybody, let's end on a good note.
Right.
So, top 3 worst Spiel des Jahres games.
Let's see. In many ways, sometimes it just comes up to Splendor. But that's both the best and the worst. The Spiel Jahres right there. Right.
Splendor won the Spiel Jahres?
I think so. Or no, it almost did. It almost.
Oh, okay.
Did.
I was like, oh man, it would have made my worst list for sure.
It came very close. I'm trying to remember all of them. Let's go ahead and start with yours first. So
Okay.
I'll go over there.
My third least favorite is Cult Express, which is not a terrible game. It just didn't do much for me. Like, I'd rather play Robo Rally if we're playing a programming game. To me, this was more like a slog, and it was just not very fun or interesting. And you know, I mean, it was an okay game. I'd play it again. I don't think it's a bad game, but to me, it just didn't like blow me away like I hope a Spiel des Jahres winner would.
They don't.
So.
Sometimes they're just there though. So
Yeah.
yeah, Cold Express. I do remember it just, and I played it a few times, and people want to bring it up, and I'm like, okay, if it's the only game left, you just want something deeper, right?
Yeah.
A little less random, maybe a little bit more control, and none of that's with Cold Express.
Right. Well, if you want to play a programming game, you want like a crazy, wild, fun experience, and Cold Express is not that. At least for me. All right, my next is actually Ticket to Ride, which, you know, I'm going to get the emails off this one, but...
I don't understand you, man.
Ticket to Ride, I mean, because most of the Spiel des Jahres winners are pretty decent games, and I do think Ticket to Ride is a fine game. It's not a bad game. Every time I play Ticket to Ride, including the very first time I played it, I was not excited by it. I just find nothing excited about that game, especially now that I know, like, generally the best strategy is hoard, like, 800 cards, and then lay your tracks, because then people don't know how to block you, you know. So that just made the game worse, like, when I started playing it that way, but I do think it's probably, in most situations, the best way to go. So, yeah, I do not like Ticket to Ride. I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's a great game. You know, I highly encourage you to check it out. If you've never played it, definitely try it out. It's just not for me.
The Markland edition is probably my favorite one of all of those.
Yeah,
but...
I've played a few of the different maps, and I would say they're all better than the American map. Like, the American map, I would skip that one, go straight to something, because all the other Ticket to Ride versions add, like, something interesting, whereas the American version is, like, just the basic version. Don't play that one. Try Markland or Norwegian map, or even Europe. You know, try something else. Mm-hmm. And then my least favorite Spiel des Jahres winner, and the only one I would say is a bad game, in my opinion, is Kingdom Builder. That game just... Oh, God. I hate
Roll
that
the
game.
dice. Roll the dice, Trey.
There's no dice in that game.
I know.
Yeah. So that game, if you're unaware, you basically dealt a card each round. You one card, and that card tells you where you have to play. And it's basically a terrain type. So yeah, you have some choice. Sometimes you have choice of where to put your house. But, I mean, usually the decision is very simple. It's like, do I want to get this power? Okay, I'll build towards that power. Or do I want to score points? Okay, I'll build that way. And, like, there's no decision. And I've heard you can play the game with a hand of cards, like as an unofficial variant, and it makes the game a lot better, because then you can build in multiple terrains. Sure, I haven't tried that, but that sounds like a much better game. And if I ever get forced to play it again, I will demand that we try out this house rule. But to me, that was the worst. What are your worst games?
Well, you know, I haven't played all the Spiel des Jahres games, right? So I've tried, but there's many of them all over time and over ages and things of that nature. And most of them are actually fairly good. They're fun to play. They go. You do what's in them. But the games that I've played that I've been less than inspired by, Turns and Taxis.
Yeah, that game's not great either.
It's just a very mad game. I mean, I'm sure when it came out, it won in 2006.
Yeah.
And it just sort of felt like, okay, this is a game along the lines of
Ticket to Ride,
many other games. And, you know, you're doing things, but it's not the greatest. I could probably go with you on Kingdom Builder. I mean, it's just not going to get much love here from me. And probably in the end, you know, after I've played a few different games and seen all of them, and I find it's really hard to believe that it won, even though it's a fun game. Actually, you know what? I'll table that comment, because this game is actually on his best list, so we'll get to it.
Oh, okay. Well, we're actually running short on time, so I'm going to run through my best list real fast. Zularedo, third best winner. It's a very short game. It's fun. Yeah, I love it. I think it still plays well, so check it out. It's a good family game too. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. This is like maybe the most thematic game I've ever played. Like you're literally solving a case by like looking at clues, as you would if you were Sherlock Holmes or something like that. So I thought it was a fascinating game. Definitely check that out.
I feel like this is a game out of time because it really is like 40 years old or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's very
and
old game.
it's a very old game, and it feels it. There's no other game like it, and it's sort
Yeah.
of a hate it or love it type of deal. I don't want to read a newspaper while I'm playing the game to play the game, and I also don't like the fact that there's not multiple copies of said things, so you have to trust what other people have researched.
Yeah.
You know,
It's it's probably a love it or hate it experience. I loved it. I thought it was fascinating.
and I think with the right people, it's great.
Yeah.
Sort of like Time Stories. So.
And my favorite game is El Grande. Again, no surprise. I tend to like heavier strategy games, and El Grande is probably the heaviest strategy game that's on the list, and way ahead of its time. Like there aren't many better area control games than El Grande now, and El Grande came out many years ago. So very deserving winner. All right, your top 3 lists.
All right. I mean, there's a few games that I started playing the hobby with and continue to play to this day because I have loved them so much. So, basically, I'm going to go back and I do like this game, though a lot of people don't. Alhambra.
Yeah,
Just nice
good filler.
base Alhambra. It's a game that brought Durkin to prominence. It's a good, simple filler. It has its deep moments, and I just love the collection of the different cards. I understand there's a top deck problem. I understand there's way too many expansions as well, but it's something I really enjoy quite a bit. Number 2 and number 1, they really could go either way for me, and they're both recent. Number 2 is Hanabi. Hanabi is like, I just try to find ways to make this game harder. The only reason it's not number 1 is because with the wrong people, it does crash and burn into flames. But just being able to guess or, to do the deduction, all the mechanics and everything, trying to get the perfect 30-point score with all unique rainbows is pretty hard.
In my opinion, if you don't play all the cards or tiles in Hanabi, you've lost. I don't even bother keeping score.
Exactly, and no bombs. I'm a perfect score guy. I have a few of them. I have 2 perfect 30-point scores, and my favorite is last year's winner, Codenames.
Codenames is a great. Yeah, I have all the versions of it.
Yeah, Codenames.
It's a very good party game.
Codenames is a game that you wonder why it didn't exist before it existed, and now that it's there, it's
such a simple concept.
Yeah, it's just the game to go. Props to Vlad Shavato, who all his other games have been too complicated to win this award, and he finally made a game that won. So
yeah, I do think it's an amazing game. Maybe slightly overrated, just because it's like some people think it's like the best thing since sliced bread, but to me, it's like such a simple concept, and it's a fun party game, but it's not like wow, I do like it's so easy to bring people in and so easy to start, so easy to explain,
and so easy to make your own cards for and go from there and make something new. It's
definitely a great game. All right, we need to get to the Topic du Jour because we only have a few minutes left. Basically, I'm asking, does it dumb down our industry to only allow light games to compete for our biggest reward? Charles, what are your initial thoughts on that subject?
No. If your industry is trying to bring people into it and have a bunch of different levels and develop a new base of customers all the time, which is what it's trying to do, and you're competing against a juggernaut like Milton Bradley, Mattel, who's just releasing nothing but some combination of good games in crap packages and crap games and good packages. You need a way for people to come in and something that they can just go to a list, trust, and pick up. It's casual gamers need to be represented too, and we need them to get started somewhere because in our larger game groups, we usually don't want to deal with them that much because we have something bigger, more complicated that we want to play. So I think, it's good that that it's an introductory award, and it's something that you have to understand that sometimes the best player is not the person you want to be running everything, right? So that's both on it's basketball time. So in the basketball season, you don't want your best player always having the ball, and sometimes in board games as well, you don't want your best, most complicated, hard game to be your face man. You really want some little cool, quick type of social person to go out and be the person to crack the ice. And people don't feel lost when they're playing something that's just intuitive, easy to learn, easy to teach, and then pretty soon they're, like for instance, Codenames, you find someone who plays it for the first time, the very next game they want to be the ones giving the clues, even though they probably shouldn't, but they still try. So.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe I think the solution is for that not to be our most well-known award anymore, because it still has all that prestige ever since it started limiting itself to like only very simple family style games. And I'd like that prestige to go to like another award, like I don't know, Origins, Gen Con, Dice Tower Awards. Just because those awards don't limit themselves. Like they'll vote for lighter games if they're really that good, but they'll also vote for heavy games, and I would like to see one of those carry more weight, because I think those awards. Well, I don't know if the other ones do it, but I know Dice Tower has a family game category, right? Or Board Game People awards too. They all have family game categories, so that you could have that category where you can give a list of games that appeal to families, but you're not, discriminating against heavier games, which maybe the best game of the year is a heavy game. That certainly happens, in my opinion, quite frequently. So I just think the Spiel des Jahres kind of like limits itself by being ostensibly a family game award. And again, I probably wouldn't care, except that it still is like the most well-regarded award in the industry. So the fact that it limited itself, but still carries as much weight as it does, I think is problematic.
Right. And, if you look at the list, if you look at every year, generally there was very few years that there's just a clear-cut winner. Sometimes there is, and that's great for the industry. But there's been a number of years where, games were close and they just went with the simpler game, just on default, because it was like easier and more accessible. And that's the problem you really have to avoid, because
another big issue.
If something's going to be good enough to be game of the year, and yes, they're in the same sort of field. I mean, you just shouldn't automatically go to the more accessible game. You should try to figure out which one is the better game, or maybe even the one that more people like to play repeatedly. I mean, for a specific instance, I do remember that year with Camel Up and Splendor, I think, were competing. That's like 2015, and I'm like, well, at the time, Splendor was the hotter game that everyone really wanted to play more of. And maybe they were right, because Camel Up is still going with making a lot of expansions, and Splendor is...
I do think Camel Up is a better game. I just don't like Splendor.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it was, in our area, Splendor was hotter, but Camel Up won the award, and, now I've played more Camel Up since 2015 ended than I, have played Splendor in that intervening time. But I still think they're both pretty good games.
So I guess my other argument would be, I don't know of any other award that does this in any other industry. I mean, like, certainly the Oscars don't do it. Oscars, will occasionally give the award to like a very highbrow art film, right? You look at like right. You look at like awards in literature. They don't limit themselves. But like, let's find a better analogy. Video game awards. As far as I know, there's no a major video game award that limits itself to like smaller family style like apps or things like that. They'll have categories. They'll have like best app game, or they'll have best children's game or things like that. But
best shooter or something like that.
Yeah, but they won't like say, well, for their game of the year award, they won't limit themselves. They'll give it to the best game of the year, whether that's super complicated and very hard to learn, or if it's a super simple game that everybody just loves playing. So I would like for the best award in our industry to have kind of the same thing, where like, yeah, they have a category for family game or whatever, but when they give the best game of the year, it is the best game of the year in the opinion of the judges. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it works the other way around. I mean, for those of us, a lot of people here on Board Game Geek, And if you look at like the top 25, top 100 games, they're almost always very heavy Euro-based games, and nothing else can really make it in. I mean, I don't even think. I mean, Codenames is #1 in party games, but I think it's. I'm not even sure if it's in the top 300.
No,
Or
it's in the top 100.
Top 100.
Yeah.
Top, sorry,
Codenames
I didn't
is
say
now
top
in the
100.
top 100.
Yeah, it is now, but for something that literally has been selling units off the shelf super quickly, it still seems sort of low, but.
And Board Game Geek is still, I think, primarily for hobbyists. I think more people are discovering the site, so that's good. But I think it's still more for hobbyists. But there are like tons of people that have never heard of Board Game Geek that will play like heavier games. So I think it's still good to highlight those games, even if like you're not just talking to Board Game Geek users. Like I think it's good to highlight those games to everyone, and I think an award that would highlight them to the world would be great. Now, the Spiel des Jahres does have a category, but they have the children's category, but then they have the heavy games category. So it's the opposite of what I was talking about before. Instead of like saying, okay, well, everyone's eligible for Game of the Year, and then we have a separate category for lighter games. They do it the other way. Only lighter games are eligible to win the Spiel des Jahres, and then they segregate the heavier games to their own award, which is an interesting way to do it.
Yeah, and the medium games just get sort of eviscerated between the two.
Yeah.
So.
If you're a medium game, sorry, you're probably not winning either of the awards. Or if you're a super heavy game, you're not going to be eligible even for the Kinderspiel. Like I've never seen them nominate something like Tricarion or something like that. However, Terraforming Mars is nominated for the Kinderspiel, and it should win, and it's probably the heaviest game that they've ever nominated for even the Kinderspiel. So that's a good development, I think. I would hope that any heavy game should be eligible for the heavy game category. So, but yeah, any closing thoughts on the Spiel des Jahres?
Man, all I can say about the Spiel des Jahres is it's a very German-centered type of war game, and I do hope that most, like the Dice Tower Awards, a few others that I've seen promoted by, primarily by the people who are selling the games, cool stuff and fun again. I hope they take off. I would like to see that as a resource, and help their sales. It would also help us figure out what to give as gifts to people, and move on from there.
You make a great point. Another good thing about Dice Tower Awards is that they don't discriminate Euro games and Ameritrash games. Like any game is eligible for a Dice Tower Award, and so when you see like their nominees for their various categories, it's a good mixture of both Euro games and Ameritrash and hybrids. Whereas the Spiel des Jahres, as Charles pointed out, is primarily focused on Euro games, with occasionally things like Ice Cool slipping in for a kids game. But all their nominees in general. I mean, Codenames won last year, which actually I didn't think it was going to win just because it's not a Euro game; it's more of a party game. But besides those few exceptions, it's generally just for Euro games. So another reason why I would like another award to kind of take the Spiel des Jahres' place in the industry. Because I think Spiel des Jahres is a great award for Germany, but I think something like the Dice Tower Awards would be a better global award for the industry.
Yeah, I don't think maybe Isle Sky won. Isle Sky won last year, so you like that game quite a bit for the Kinderspiel, right?
Yeah,
so.
And that is a medium game, so had no business winning a heavy game award. Should have been a nominee for the Spiel des Jahres, because I think it's a medium game, but it leans more towards light than heavy, in my opinion. But
and
just one of the many ways that I think the Spiel des Jahres is kind of messing up.
I mean, coming off Broom Service, Istanbul, Legends of Andor, Village won one year, and Seven Wonders. So it started out good, and then it's just gotten progressively.
Well, Seven Wonders won the main award, I think.
It won the Kinderspiel.
Oh, no, it won the Kinderspiel. Okay, yeah. So things we've learned. Seven Wonders, not a heavy game, right? It shouldn't be winning the heavy game award. It should be a nominee for the family category. If it's going to be either, like, I don't think it's a family game. It's more of a medium game. But it certainly leans more towards the family category than the heavy category. So, anyway, I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done with the Spiel des Jahres, is my overall point. Or, if you're not going to change the Spiel des Jahres, then at least give, we need to build up the other awards and talk about things like, that's why I keep mentioning Dice Tower Awards. I would love for them to take over, or Origins Awards, or Gen Con Awards, something else.
An American award.
Because
for America.
Because Americans do it best. Okay, that's no.
I think that's about it for this program.
Yeah. All right. Well, until next time.
We're eternally bored, so you don't have to be. Peace.
Peace.